Gonna share my screen. All right. Hello and welcome to our second meeting of the semester for the Sport and Exercise Psychology Club. I'm your president, Genevieve, here. Thank you for being here. So today we are going to be talking about tips and tricks and things we should know to improve our resume and CV. And we're also going to clarify what the difference is between those two because it can be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to share an agenda. For today, we're going to have Dr. Eid start out with giving some of her insight into what helped her get to where she is now with her CVs and such. And then we're going to do a nice resume and cover letter video just to make sure we all understand what exactly should be going on those documents. And then we're going to talk about the difference between a resume and CV. We'll jump into some breakout rooms if necessary, and then we will wrap up by talking about resources and giving a little bit of time to talk about upcoming meetings. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to you, Dr. Eid, and I will stop sharing and I will let you share.
Okay, thanks, Genevieve. I put together some basic slides. So I'm going to share them that go just a little bit of an overview. Oh, can you enable screen sharing? Thanks. Okay. Okay. So just really briefly, I know most of you probably do know the difference between a CV and a resume, but that is the most common question I get. So when I have looked at grad school applications, and so that's where I see the most CVs and resumes is, those of you that applied to our program, you had to either submit a CV or a resume. We ask for one, we don't ask for both. And a lot of times I do get students emailing me asking, what do I submit? Which one do you prefer? And really, what is the difference? And for our purposes, there isn't a huge difference to get into a master's program because most students don't have a very strong academic history at that point. Like, you've been undergrad for a few years and that's sort of it for what you could put on an academic CV. So most of the time students submit resumes. I personally have not written a resume since I think 2005, maybe. I was trying to remember the last time I wrote a resume, and it's been a very long time because I only live in the world of CVs now, which are pretty different. So typically, job listings will ask for one. Resumes primarily for non-academic jobs. CVs are just academic resumes. They're just sort of packaged differently. So for teaching positions, and we do get students who, if you're not interested in a PhD program, maybe you want to teach at a community college, they typically want a CV instead of a resume. So even if you're not interested in a PhD program, if you want to teach at some point, even if it's as an adjunct or a lecturer or something like that, they still want a CV also. And there are some similarities. The best advice I got was to have sort of a set version and then tailor each one to whatever job you get. Putting education first and the degree, not the institution. So sometimes, and this is what I did when I first wrote a CV, is I put where I went to school first, but they want to know sort of level of degree, whether it's a job or a PhD. They want to know what degree are you in right now, or what degree are you about to get, or what degree do you have? And the institution comes second to that. Big names are helpful. But at the same time, if you don't have the terminal degree or the primary degree that a place wants, they're not even going to look. And you want to match wording to the job description whenever possible. So I know the video might cover different terms that are maybe better to use than others. In general, you want to mimic what they're looking for and show that you have that. And in whatever format you choose, I don't think that there is a right or wrong format. There are some things that maybe help direct the reader to what's most important, maybe in better ways and in not so great ways. But ultimately, you want to highlight what's important regardless of all the other details. Like what do you need to do to catch the reader's attention? So CV versus resume, CVs are long. They can be multiple pages. I'm going to show you different versions of mine, where I started out with a shorter one and now I have a longer one. But you need to balance what we call depth versus padding. What happens, especially if you don't have a long history, is students or even faculty, because the other time that I read a lot of people's CVs are when we hire. So I've served on search committees. We hired Dr. Fergasa a couple years ago, and we sift through the resumes of full faculty members. So it was everybody from coming out of a PhD program to people who've been in an institution for several years, and they have really long CVs too. So I get sort of both ends. People fresh out of an undergrad to people who have been in a faculty position for a while. And those are really, really different. But you can always tell when people sort of pad the CV or pad the resume with things that don't really make sense or that aren't really real. Like as an example, there was one applicant that we had a couple years ago who you list your publications, and I'll show you how we do that. He put blog posts under publications, and typically in our field, we only think of peer-reviewed publications. And so looking through that, it was like, did you put it there because you haven't published enough, or did you put it there because you really think it's meaningful? And we didn't even interview that person. That was enough of like a strike where they went in the no pile. Like, didn't read the cover letter, didn't do anything else. It's like, you padded your CV, don't care, it's done. So, there are sometimes that there are red flags that we look for. The order of it, because people will not read the whole thing, either on a resume or a CV. If you're applying to a PhD program, you want your research experience near the top because that's something a PhD program will look for. For like a PsyD program, you might want your applied experience more near the top because that's what a PsyD might be more interested in. They'll care that you did research, but they also want to know, are you going to be a good fit for like a counseling program or something like that? And so you want the most relevant information front and center at the top. So if they don't get past page 3, it's okay. You want to have stuff there because they might sift through it if they're interested, but you want to grab their attention right away. For a resume, it's going to be shorter. It's going to be more concise. And your focus is going to be on skills more so than job titles. So you want to know, like, what do you bring? What skills have you gained? And so like out of our program, you can focus a lot on interpersonal skills because we develop a lot of that and you have the coursework to back it up. So, depending on the type of job, there's a lot that you can bring out, even if it's through coursework. Like there's ways to talk about that. And those are things that I can help you more if you have specific questions later on. And going in reverse chronological order. And what I also see on resumes that we don't do in CVs is having sort of multiple columns on a page where you've got like, here's my job history, here are my skills. Like you're trying to get as much information on one page as possible. Where in a CV, we don't do that. It's like, because everything is so lengthy, it's like, we just kind of throw it all in there in order. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So some of the examples I have. And before I get into examples, does anybody have any questions or specific things that they want to know before I move further? Genevieve?
So you mentioned that the blog posting was a red flag, and you said it was one of the red flags you look for. What are the other ones?
So I do want to clarify, when I say the blog posting was a red flag, it's not that it was a blog posting, it's where they put it. And how they framed it. Because if somebody does, like, if you have a pretty substantial presence online and you write a lot and you have an audience, there is a place for that. And that's something that I do want to know. It's sort of trying to package it as like as a peer-reviewed publication, because generally we look at numbers. You have a lot of publications, you're in. You don't have, you're out. Like that's sort of where it is at this level. And so if we see that and it's like, well, that's not what we're looking for in terms of what could get you tenure. Like that's what we're looking for. Like if we hire you, will that get you tenure? So other red flags, if things seem like obviously made up, like that's a problem. And I wouldn't say red flag, but something that students do a lot is put photos on their resumes. I've heard different people have different styles that they like. In general, I'm not sure a photo is going to help you. I think if you want people to know different things about you, there's other ways to highlight that. I think photos can be off-putting to people. I see a lot of like artsy stuff on resumes where like there'll be clip art or things like that. And I think that just takes up space. Like we can sort of tell if you're trying to take up space to make it look like you've done more. So I would stay away from flowers, like pink, like background colors, like those things, they come up a lot. I wouldn't do that. Like you can have some things to stand out. I'm not saying like never use like blue wording, you know, have something like I think you can use color to sort of direct attention. But when it turns into like very sort of flowery over the top kind of thing, we might not put you near it. It doesn't look professional, is what I would say. This is not really a time for your personality to come through. There's other ways, like a cover letter is also where you want your personality, like who you are is where you explain that. But I don't want to make judgments off of you based on like the fact that you put a clip art flower in the corner of your resume. Like that's not what I want to do either. So those are just some things that I would stay away from, if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
And I think sometimes here too, like those of you that are here are also people that didn't do that in general. So I would say like for you all, you're already at a baseline level of having sort of level of like, what do I need to put in? Because the people that did all the red flags aren't in our program. So there is that too, in terms of our audience. So I thought what I do is show you some of the different CVs that I made at different times, because I got different advice sort of at different points in my career. So as an example, this was the first CV that I made for a PhD. No, this was not right. Wait. That's not right. Okay, I think this was the one that I was updating it right after I applied to PhD program. So this is when I started my PhD program, but I just added education in. So I was already at Michigan State, but I sort of listed it like a resume, like I had the years that I had my doctoral program in progress, and I put sort of the university first. And so that was feedback that I got later on, was like, no, people want to know the PhD first. They want to know the master's. They want to know that. They don't care about the years as much. They want to know that you're about to get your degree or when you're going to graduate. But they don't care what years you were enrolled, like that kind of stuff. They just don't care. And what I had done is, because I didn't have anybody really to ask about a CV, my master's advisor didn't really talk about it. I just Googled people. Like I looked at faculty at Michigan State who I was going to work with, and I sort of Googled them and found their CV online, and I just modeled it a little bit. Not exactly, but figured if they wanted to do it that way, that must mean that they wouldn't hate it if I did it that way. But later on, I learned too that different universities also just have different requirements. So like there's things that I do now that I'm required to do through the university. So whatever version of my CV that's floating around online might be different than what I would actually prefer maybe to be. So another thing that I don't like to do anymore is, at the time, they always said to put your address at the top. And so this is where I lived. And so this was online. I don't remember why this was online, but people knew where I lived. Like people could search online and see where I lived. And so I don't recommend doing that. I don't think we need it. I would actually now put my name bigger and have some contact information, but I don't think you need an address. And some people might disagree with that. I don't think you need your address on a resume or a CV. You need some way for them to contact, but through email, if you have, I'd put my LinkedIn here now. I would probably put my Twitter, just so they can, because they're gonna look for it anyway. I search for it. Like when we had, I would say even if I have like people that are a toss up for me, I search for them online. I want to see what their online presence is, and they will look for you. So you may as well give it to them, because they will try to find you anyway, if they're considering it. So at the time, I had taken a year off in between my master's and my PhD, and I taught for a year. So I had some of my academic positions on here. So I taught, I had, during my master's, I ran a grant program. So I had that project here. And then I was a teaching fellow and a teaching assistant during my master's at UNT. And then I listed some of the awards that I had won. And if you're going into like a PhD program, I would put those up at the top if you have them, because those are things that they want. And then I put my publications at the time. So this is what I had going in. Again, having an extra year helped with the publications. And I separate out if something's under review versus published, because this is where the padding comes in. if you've got some stuff that you're working on, sometimes people will just throw like titles in and they'll put in progress in parentheses. And if it's all that, like you can put a couple of those, especially at your level. If you're working on a thesis, definitely put that in there. But if I'm looking at it and I only see a bunch of those, that's going to be a red flag to me too. Because like, what does in progress really mean? Does it mean it's an idea you had, or does it mean that you actually have data collection? So like, for example, Kaylee, because I think you're probably the closest there, I would put your thesis in here, and I would start maybe identifying journals that you might submit to. And you can even put a title in there and be like, no, my goal is to submit to this journal. And that means that they know that you even know something about the submission process, even if you don't have like gotten to that step. And then presentations. So if you don't have a lot of publications, which most master's degree students do not, presentations can be really helpful, because this shows that you have worked on something. And if you have the opportunity to present, like every presentation is a line. Every presentation is a line, whether it's a poster, whether it's a verbal presentation. That's a great way, if you're interested in like a PhD or a PsyD or anything academic, that's a great way to build a CV, is presentations. Because people will see that you can even stand up in front of a room. Like those are skills here that on a CV we would interpret. Like if I see presentations, I say, okay, I know that person has a level of confidence because I know that they have already gotten up in front of people. They have good speaking skills. They've been able to go through like an abstract review process. They've been able to do that. For a resume, that might be different. I think you can still put a presentation on a resume, but I would explain it and talk about the skills that you gain from the process, even if it's very brief. Because people who are looking at that might not have the same interpretation. So in a resume, I would hit them over the head with it and be like, this is what I did in this presentation, so that they know. Guest lectures you can put in there if you especially want to work with any of us. Often, if we're teaching an undergrad class, you'd have the opportunity to do a guest lecture if you want, and you can call that a guest lecture. You can call it an invited lecture. And then you can explain it, and it's another line. And that's helpful too if you're interested in teaching. And I always put the membership in organizations. Like if you're a member of NASPA, like I know it's expensive to join organizations, but be a member. You can put, I would say, the club in here too, for sure. Especially if you have a leadership role of the club, put that up near the top. People are going to want that. And then I had other sport experience, which for a PhD wasn't as relevant, but for those of you on a resume, like sport experience, if you're applying for like a consulting position or something in the sport industry, then your athletic experience does matter. And that is helpful. So I would say put athletic experience in if you are applying for jobs in our industry in particular. Okay, and so here's what I did differently when I was applying to this job. So here I changed how I wrote my degree. So I started out with the degree first, the year that it was going to be done, and then a feedback that I got, advice that I got, was also to put some of the content areas. So for you all, you know, you can talk, I wouldn't list every class you took, they can see a transcript. But if you have areas of emphasis, like if you're more exercise-based, if you're more sport-based, you can list some sort of like general content coursework areas. And I do recommend that. Or if you have a specific topic of interest, so even if you don't do a thesis, you have a project where there's a topic that you're more interested in, I'd put it here, because then people do know that you maybe have a little bit more of a specialty. Because right now when you're in grad school, ultimately you're starting to specialize in something, and putting that out there as an interest area, as something that you've gained some expertise in, because you're gaining more expertise than you think. I would put some content there. I put my advisor names because at the time, these were both some big names in the field. Here, I think you should name drop. I think name drop is helpful when you have it. I would put the three of us on there, especially if you're going into consulting. Dr. Madrigal's now in some high-level committees. put those names on there. People know us. So I'd put some names. And then here, because I was teaching focused, here's where you want to tailor depending on the type of job. So our university prioritizes teaching. It also prioritizes research, but at sort of the next level. So I wanted to put teaching experience first. So what I did is I went through, and instead of listing my classes that I taught, I also included what I did. Because if you're coming out of grad school, and if you're coming out of a master's program, there's really different meanings behind like a teaching assistant. If you're teaching an activity class, you can sell it as being sole instructor. You can talk more about those things because people don't know, did you just take attendance or were you really in charge? Those are things that matter. And so, what I've seen some other people do is they list a lot of courses. They might list all the courses, and then they have a brief sort of overview of what they did if it was similar. So for example, like this class, Kin 445 and Kin 345 at Michigan State were really similar because they were both writing focused. But at the time there hadn't been a lot of online learning. And so the fact that I taught online was sort of a big deal 6 years ago, not as big a deal now. People know that, but also including modality can be helpful. Like I have experience teaching online. Like I taught this one online. People see that like, okay, you're comfortable with that technology. And that can be helpful. And so then I went to publications. And so here's another change that I made is I highlighted my name. And so that's not something I had thought to do my first time around, because I want it to sort of pop up like what's first, what's second, because the higher up you are, the better, but also sort of make it pop. Like they don't want to search through all those names if you're publishing with a lot of people or presenting with a lot of people. Highlight your name. And I do it in reverse chronological order, what's most recent. Sometimes people have said like you can bullet point it and give a little synopsis. So if you don't have a lot of presentations, but you do have a couple, I would do a brief synopsis as well of what was covered and what the topic was, because that also just gives a little more information. I included a section on mentoring too. And here's where I think you all can add some stuff is when you're in your second year, and if you have a shadow, I think you can include some of that information there without getting into some of the ethical issues that Dr. Madrigal and Dr. Pagasa can talk about in terms of how you talk about applied work. But I think you can talk about mentoring a first-year student in that process. And that goes farther than you think. Like you're not a supervisor, but you're leading. And when you can emphasize like leadership in some way, that you're training somebody else, people love that skill, whether it's an academic position or if it's on a professional resume. I think that's really helpful. And I would emphasize that because that is an experience that not everybody gets. And so here I had had some of my own undergrad students at the time. And so I listed the presentations that my undergrads did and that I sort of oversaw. And then I included there's a service component in it. I would call it service instead of volunteer, because honestly, service sounds better. But you can break it up by type. So here I had sort of university service, I had departmental service, I had community service. So you all, if you're a leader in an organization, that's service. If you have a leadership role, you can put it here. You could also put it elsewhere, depending on how you want to sell it. I'm sure if you have opportunities to be out in the community, you can frame that as like community level. So for example, requirements of my job, I have to have community level, department level, university level, college level, and professional level service. I have to fit all 5 of those categories. So knowing that ahead of time, I was able to kind of say like, okay, at least I have these kinds of categories. So I know what different categories are. I had done a little consulting. So I had a little consulting here, but I'm not a consultant. So that's really low in my CV. You might want that higher if that's something that's a bigger priority for you or a position that you're looking at. So for me, I had had my coaching and consulting experience together because that was not going to be my role moving forward. That was not the job. And so here, this was also really tailored for this job. This was different. Like I also applied for a job at, well, I applied for a lot of different jobs, but Boise State. And Boise State is a higher level of research intensive. And so here, what I did differently for that job too, is I did not start out with these courses. I went publications first because that's what they care about more, because they're more research focused. Faculty teach 2 classes a semester there because they're expected to have a heavier research load. Our load is technically 4 classes a semester and a lighter research load. And what they care about our research is that we involve students. So when there is research, so for example, this is the CV I submitted to get tenure a year ago. So this is not, the last time I updated this was probably last September. And so now this job is there. So now instead of writing out like what I did in each course, they just want to know what I taught, because they know, the university knows what I've done. And here, what I've done too is highlight student authors. So I have my name in bold, but also if I was working with a student. And so here you can also, if there's any mentorship opportunity, and I think any way that you can highlight anytime you work in any sort of oversight of another student is to highlight it in whatever way works for you, because again, people want to see that. So here, any student, so these were mostly theses, although this was a project that we did. And so like here, earlier on, I didn't have any student research, but then later on we did. Here for us, they don't count anything that I did before I came to Long Beach. So here I'm like, and so this is silly now, I'm required to put a line here that says like, if I published before I came to the university, it doesn't count for my job. It got me the job and it's now worthless. So moving forward, they only care what I did, what I am doing while I'm here. And so now I have like even the present, it gets a lot longer the further you go. And so yeah, I have the same thing under presentations now too. But again, I highlight, italicize students, put my name in bold, just so people can see what different things are. And then sort of at the bottom here, I had an in progress one because it was a revise and resubmit. So this means that we had submitted this. This is this did get published a little bit later. So this was one of our former master students. We had received a revise and resubmit, so it's not a rejection. So it shows that it's in the process. And then my service is much more extensive now and just sort of bullet points. So the more extensive what you have, you don't have to put as much information because it just takes longer too. So now I have the different levels: professional, community, university, college, and department. And then like I have a student advising section. So these are things that wouldn't really necessarily matter to you all where you are right now, but those are things to think about like working towards in the future. So is that helpful at all?
Yes, thank you so much. I feel like I learned quite a lot and I feel like I need to get writing immediately.
The thing is, like, just whenever you do something, write it down. Like that's, I think, the biggest advice. Like I had to create a whole document for tenure, but I think here too, this reminded me that I haven't updated my CV in a year, which there are more things to add now. But every time you do a presentation, get it on paper because you don't want to forget. Because you do forget things. If you have to sit down and try to construct your history right now, you're going to leave something out. And the more that you can get, the better. So yeah, anytime you get elected to a position on the club, if you presented, make sure that that is already on there. If you volunteer to work on the conference, that's a line you can put in your CV. If you work on multiple committees on the conference, so one of the things that we can do is name each subcommittee that works on the conference, and that's a name you can use on your CV. Like name things, put a title. So it's not just that you worked on a conference, you served on the abstract review committee for this conference. Like that gives it a little extra piece. And so yeah, give it a title, give it a name, and that's helpful. But yeah, don't forget, because you will at the end, and try to reconstruct it at the end is hard. If you teach an activity course, I have seen too where people put the number of students they oversaw. So like that's something I didn't do. But how large of a class? Did you teach, like, did you have a class of 20 students in an activity course? That's actually substantial. Like that's not like a 5-person lab class. You might want to like put in parentheses how many students if you taught an activity class, or if you're working in Bickerstaff, how many athletes did you work with? Probably a lot. Put the whole number, like not, you know, I worked with 2 teams a year, put the whole number that you've worked with every interaction since you started, because that becomes impressive over time.
Is
Other
there such
questions?
thing as having like too much, like going too far back? Like if I put like working at a gym in high school, like that's not important.
No. And a lot of those you can leave off. I left off more and more over time. Like I worked other, because I didn't start grad school till 5 years after. There's a lot of jobs on there I don't have on either a resume or a CV at this point. I don't put them on there. I mean, the only reason I still have my coaching experience from that time is because it's relevant to our field. Otherwise I'd remove it because nobody cares. Nobody cares about the other jobs I was working at the time, because coaching also doesn't support you. So there's that too.
So then like would like undergrad be the cutoff? Like
You can have
part?
jobs in undergrad, but make it if it's relevant. So for you, because you're writing a CV, if the jobs show like leadership skills, but if like working in a gym, honestly might not matter.
Okay.
If you have other things, because they'll care more about those other things. So like for you, focusing on the presentations, focusing on the club leadership, focusing on your work at Bickerstaff, focusing on the projects. And I think, for example, for you, Kaylee, because you work on a lot of different projects, I'd give a data fellows section. Like, here's what sort of the topic of what data fellows is. Here's like maybe the products. So it's a focus on the product. Like, are there presentations? How many presentations came out of that? Or like, what are the skills that you're getting out of that? Name drop Dr. Gray on that. Like, you collaborated outside of the department. Do that. Use the word collaboration. I love the word collaboration. You have interdepartmental collaboration already. And those are kinds of things that you can do. Yeah.
For the part about listing names for educational stuff, I assume that's mainly for CV, but is there any situation where a resume you might want to list names?
I think if there's one where they might know of one of us, I would. Like, for example, and that might be where you talk to some of us first to see like sort of who's in that area and do we know them or not. If we do, then yeah, you can also do that in a cover letter. If there isn't room on a resume, like that's something to put in the cover letter, is like, I was supervised by these faculty who are CMBC certified, like those kinds of things you can put in a cover letter too. The thing about a cover letter, people have different strategies for it. If I don't like the CV, I don't read the cover letter. Or if I don't like the resume, the cover letter doesn't matter. The cover letter is a chance for you to explain, but it's not going to get you in that pile. Like, the whole purpose of the CV or the resume is to get you in the right pile, because they'll only read that pile. That's the goal.
So the cover letter is the CV. And so essentially, I mean, like, it is after the cover letter, but to think about it like that comes first.
The cover letter, I would write after the CV. The cover letter you need to tailor to the job. The CV you need to tailor to the job too. But the cover letter is where you get to go in more detail about some of your experiences, but only the relevant ones. Like, you just want to highlight the absolute most important. You can also talk about your fit specifically for the position and why you want to work there. That's a big thing, is the why you want to work there, because they can gain a lot from the education you list and the skills you have, but your reason why you're interested can also help you stand out. So the cover letter is definitely separate for both of these things. You don't want to like just rehash everything that's listed. But I also wouldn't, like, if I see something like really big on someone's CV and they don't put it in the cover letter, I get a little confused sometimes. So you do want to mention, like, if you worked on some of the bigger projects or you did a lot of consulting, like where you spent most of your time, if that's not in the cover letter, that might be a little strange. And we're also happy to read over these things for you. We're definitely willing, all three of us, to give you feedback. I feel like I took a lot more of the time than I meant to, so sorry about that.
No worries. We appreciate you being here and giving us your time and all these awesome details that are definitely going to help us down the road. With that being said, I just wanted to double check if we have any more questions for Dr. Eid.
Well, I'm around if you have questions.
I have just a semi-related question, but I saw the email about the Diamondbacks internship position. I'm curious, just like how many opportunities like that are out there?
There are some. It's a little hard to tell because so many of the opportunities shut down during COVID that to predict when everything starts coming back is hard to say. But they will come up from time to time. And I think maybe you can have Kaylee or David do some scouting at ASP next week and see if they hear, because that's where you sort of hear a lot of things of like just sort of rumblings, and sort of hear what might be coming too. So maybe they can help out with that.
Yeah, I remember for ASP being online last year, the Diamondbacks did have their own little like Zoom meeting at the grad fair. So like, yeah, if there are other like companies at that grad fair, we'll report back.
Yeah.
Part of me wishing I went to ASP now, but next year.
Well, there's others, and then we're hoping to bring more names into our conference, and that's where you'll meet people and make those connections too. And that's where you'll hear things. Mhm. This is not the last one. All right, well, that's it. I'm gonna mute myself. Thanks, everyone. I'm gonna head out.
Thank you, Dr. Eid, for being here. We appreciate you. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen again, go back to those slides. Let's see. All right, so Dr. Eid did such a great job. I feel like we can breeze through the second half of this meeting. So, oh, let me present. There we go. Okay, so I can kind of just quickly roll through this stuff because a lot of the details she did hit on, which is great. So this, I'm gonna say that you should watch this. I'm not gonna say let's do it right now because it is a bit of a hefty video with a lot of good information. So what we'll do is we'll probably just send out an email to the club members with this, and then there's a handful of other videos from the Career Center, which is really great. So moving on. Oh, and it's gonna start. No, we're not. Okay, so Dr. Eid hit on this really well, so I'm just gonna lightly breeze through this one. I thought it was interesting that the CV is called a curriculum vitae, which in the video prior actually just means your life story, and they mean that in academics. So I thought that was a fun point to make. And as we had heard from Dr. Eid, for resumes, we're going for specific positions, talking about skills and qualifications for a specific job. This is shorter, and the CV goes much more in depth, which is great, and then is really good if you're looking to go into postdoctoral teaching and research or any other institutional positions. And then of course, like she mentioned, the publications, posters, and presentations are a great thing to have on there. And if you're not sure which one is going to be best for the position in which you're applying, you can always just ask. It's better to ask for clarification so you don't get knocked into the no pile right away. Okay, so then this was another video that I think was helpful again, I think Dr. E did a really great job. So I'll just go ahead and have this broadcasted to you via email in case you wanted some more information there. Okay, well, now we're going to go into some breakout rooms. I have a few questions for us to kind of maybe think about, which is what did we learn from all this? What was the most helpful tip? What changes can we make for certain job applications? And when do we use a resume versus a CV? So I'm going to go ahead and break us out for a few minutes to have a chat. Okay. And here we go. Oh, just kidding. There we go.
Also, this is just a random thought, but when she was talking about how when she reviewed applications, she would like go through people's Twitters and stuff. I immediately went to my Twitter and looked at what people would see.
I don't have Twitter, so I'm good.
Good call.
I am very inactive on Facebook, which I think I just have like my profile photo. I made it in high school just to get some extra credits on a game I used to play.
Farmville?
No, Madden. I played a Madden mobile game. I forget what
I
it's
played
called now.
that too. Yeah.
You get like an extra 200 coins, which I needed to buy. I don't know who was good at the time. probably like Aaron Rodgers or something. Just someone
Yeah.
I needed on my team.
That was a fun game.
Oh, huge. It was awesome, dude.
Okay. So I just wanted to go ahead and share with you guys some resources that are available to us as students. So the Career Center is a very, very great place to take your resume, take your cover letter, take your CV, get it worked on a little bit, seen by someone. So you can schedule appointments through Beach Connect. And then they have Career Link also is one of the chicklets on our single sign-on. And then they are letting us know what jobs are looking for people that have graduated or are students from Long Beach State. So that's pretty sweet. They also have some workshops and webinars. The next one is coming up on Wednesday, November 9th. I'm assuming it'll be similar to this. So if you want to reinforce whatever we went over today and then have that as well to reinforce all this stuff, that would be awesome. And then you just have to register through Beach Sync. And then here is the website down here in case you are curious about checking it out. And then additional resources are going to be some Instagram accounts. Daniel, our treasurer, was kind enough to share these with us and mention that these are some pretty good places to find information. So Student Center for Professional Development obviously sounds like a pretty great one. Educational Opportunity Program. The ASI has an account that shares some pretty useful information. And then for the guys out there, the Men's Success Initiative is something that you could look into. Also, as Dr. Eve kind of mentioned, she has her LinkedIn on her CVs and whatnot. And that's just a really great way to have an online presence and start building a professional network online and connect with other individuals in the field. I've also seen and heard of a lot of really good ways to search for jobs through LinkedIn and looking at like if someone has the position you want, and then trying to see, like Dr. Reed said, if you can find some of this stuff online, and then looking at the action words inside of the job listing and then putting those on your resume is great, which they go over in that video that we are going to save for another day. And then also, last but not least, is talk to your professors and ask for advice and feedback. So it would be ideal, right, for all of us to go and work on our resumes, work on our CV, and then schedule some office hours and get it looked at. That would be like the most ideal thing. So again, that can be through any of your professors, current or past, I'm sure is great. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that. And then let's see. Yeah, just gonna go ahead and wrap up and say thank you for being here today. Let us know if you have any more questions, and we'll definitely share those resources that we got from the Career Center. They had like quite a few videos that they sent me to share with you all. So that would be great if we could share that. And then Kaylee is gonna go ahead and give us a Google Forms link to vote for our next activity on Wednesday, November 2nd at noon. So we'll see what we vote on this time. And then I just wanted to put this in your sphere that quite a while from now, November 30th, it's a little bit of a ways away, but we're going to be having our next virtual meeting. And we're going to be talking to two students at, I believe, is it Colorado State? A university in Colorado, maybe.
University of North Colorado is where Danielle is. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. So she's going to be talking about her experiences in a PhD program. And then we have another SCP alumni, Jania, who's going to be sharing about her experience in a PsyD program. So if you're curious or want to hear what options are out there and what it's like, then that will be happening on Wednesday, November 30th, and we'll let you know the time as we get closer. So again, thank you for being here. Let's go ahead and submit our votes, and I'll stick around if anyone has any questions or wants to chat.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.